providing you with another of the National Committee on Jewish Scouting webinars. Tonight's presentations will actually be a panel providing information from different parts of the country and different perspectives on how Council Interfaith Committees function and how they can benefit your membership, specifically targeting Jewish Scout and other ethnicities where we can focus in. We have 4 presenters this evening: Jeff Goldsmith, who is the National Religious Relationships Committee and a member of the National Jewish Committee on Scouting; Howard Prager, who is from the Northeast Illinois Council, also a member of the National Jewish Committee; Father Andrew, and I'm not even going to try the last name because I mess it up. He can introduce himself, who is from my local Garden State Council and an Eagle Scout himself, and brings with him a very unique perspective; and Norman Kahn, who is from the Heart of America Council and also a member of the National Jewish Committee on Scouting. We have a great panel this evening of individuals from different facets of Scouting, as well as different parts of the country, to all talk about the topic of interfaith committees and how they can help to boost membership. With that, I would like to turn the program over to Jeff Goldsmith, who again is on the National Religious Relationships Committee, has had several positions within our region, and has been a long-time presenter at programs for the National Jewish Committee. Jeff?
Thanks, Mark. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Goldsmith. I am a vice chair for the National Membership Subcommittee of the Religious Relationships Committee. And you may ask, why is membership important to our religious relationships committees? Really, at its base, membership is everybody's business. If you think that membership is not part of your role, I hope you would rethink that, because without membership, all of the great programs that we do, all of the great awards and emblems that we present, we won't have a group to present them to, and we won't have opportunities like that. So tonight we're going to be talking about growing membership through religious charter partners. I want to give you some ideas on some of the tools that are available that you can take a look at, and I'll hone this down to get to Judaism as well. So what are we talking about? Obviously, different faiths, different symbols, but most important is to talk about membership. You won't hear me mention, you heard it once, but you won't hear it again. I'm not going to be talking to you about programs or awards or emblems. I could be talking solely about membership. At this point, many faiths, including Judaism, are really underrepresented in Scouting America. There's a great history of Jewish charter partners over the years, but like a lot of the program, a lot of those partners have fallen away for whatever reason, and now's the opportunity to bring them back. One of the things that's really important for us to think about is when we go to a new charter partner, what do they get out of this, right? What is the benefit to them? And the concept that we always try to make sure that we talk about is scouting on their own terms. So, for example, when we're talking about members of the Orthodox community, we want to make sure that scouting is on their terms. It meets all of the dietary, all of the religious requirements, all of the other things that they need in order to do scouting, which is why scouting really always goes back to it's very local. It's back to your charter partner. There's a big goal to try to increase the number of charter partners within the organization. Just to give you a little bit of history, for many, many years, councils and regions and the national organization looked at a +1 mindset. Essentially, if we could just get one more kid than last year, we're better. That kind of doesn't work anymore, because we went to a real rock bottom during COVID, during the bankruptcy, and during a lot of the other things that have come up over the last couple of years. +1 really isn't one more than last year. It's digging ourselves out of the hole of almost 25 years. If you think about why more units make sense, more units are really, in the sales model, more opportunities for kids or youth to join, more stores, if you will. Units formed in underserved faiths and ethnicities also allow, as I said, scouting to exist on their own terms. And that really is whatever the charter partner wants for the organization. And I mentioned dietary or religious observance when I talked about the Orthodox community and the Jewish faith, but that also applies to other faiths as well, whether that be no camping trips over a Sunday, or whether that be other festivals or holidays or religious observances or faith or dietary that are observed. When you think about a new unit, it's really like the three-legged stool, right? You need to have youth, You need to have an available charter partner. And then you're going to need that volunteer and professional help over the first 3 years to make sure that that unit succeeds. Nationally, what we know is if a unit gets past the first 3 years, they're more likely to be a unit that will exist in the long term. The key time for a new unit is those first 3 years. So we may be talking about extra commissioner service, right? There's a confab tonight. We may be talking about extra training, or maybe offering training at times that we haven't ever thought of. How many times do councils offer training on Saturday? That just simply won't work for the Orthodox community in many cases. I wanted to talk to you about resources. So one of the things that is available is as part of the census, and the last one was done in 2020, is a religious study by county. So when I say county, I mean county, which is a subdivision of a state. They can tell you where people exist who believe in a specific faith tradition in that county. It's helpful, but it's also dated. The opportunity to go into the slideshows right there, you can go ahead and take a look for yourself. One of the things that helps update that, and it's a little bit closer to our time frame, is the Pew Religious Landscape Study. That was done only a few years ago, and that has, again, similar information that you can figure out where people live. We did the study based on the Islamic faith, but I'll show you later you can do that for any faith, including Judaism. The next important thing after we look at the census and the Pew study is the ARDA data, Association of Religious Data Archives, ARDA, A-R-D-A. And that shows you a map. And if you think about the map, the best thing that I can tell you is the darker the color means the more people that believe in the faith in that area. In this case, it's a map for Islam, but it shows where the significant populations are, right? And we would expect significant populations in the Northeast, right? In the Southeast in Florida, California, but also very much in Chicago, as well as in a lot of the Midwestern states and other places where we might not think to look. We took, again, looking at the Islamic faith, we took the Chicagoland area. And the reason we actually did this was we started looking at a different faith entirely. And I'll show you why we landed on Islamic faith. But we started looking for Greek Orthodox, and we thought Chicago would be a great opportunity to show that. This shows that for this particular map, that the adherence rate, and that's the higher the number of people that believe in that particular faith in Cook County, which is Chicagoland, Chicago plus the suburbs, is about 59. This is just that same slide blown up, and you see Chicago and the suburbs are darker in color, right? But the good thing about ARDA is it also helps us identify where there are youth, meaning those under the age of 18. That's the community we serve in most of our primary programs, Cub Scouts and Scouts BSA. So we can identify not only where a faith is prevalent, but where there's youth that might be available, or what we call total available youth, TAY, for the scouting program. I said we started looking at Greek Orthodox, right? And we thought, well, that's probably a great opportunity. But if you look, we actually found, while Greek Orthodox is an opportunity in Chicago, look at the Islamic faith, only second to the Catholic Church, and very much higher in the list. One of the other things that's helpful from the ARDA data, you can also tell where that faith is also prevalent in other communities. For example, if you're in Chicago, you can reach out to folks either in Greater New York Council or in Northern New Jersey Council, because those are the areas that you're going to see significant populations to compare notes. One of the other things that's really important, if you look in the bottom of the screen, over time, you can see there's almost no adherence rate, meaning almost no members of the Islamic faith in Chicago and that surrounding area in 1980. But look, it's already up to 13.4 as of the census, and it's almost doubling each time it goes. Now, again, this is that TAY data. So this is the total available youth under 18. And this kind of shows you Illinois, but Chicago is also in there as well, and shows you where you can find those youth. So again, if you are serving Chicago or somewhere in that state, you can see where you might be able to set up a new unit. We used Islam as the starting point, but you can do this for Judaism. You start with the Pew data, which is much more updated than the census data, and you're going to see where the significant populations are. And we're not going to be surprised by a lot of this, right? But we're going to see Northeast, we're going to see Southeast, we're going to see California, we're going to see Texas, we're going to see a significant population in the Midwest. Again, but there's also other significant populations that are available. Now you're going to see this on the ARDA data. And again, no great surprise. You're going to see where there's more of the population, right? But again, remember, you got to go and look to see where the youth are. Florida may have a significant number of people of the Jewish population, but are they under 18? Are they eligible to join our programs? That's the question. And again, the darker the color, the more significant or more density of that faith in that area. So there's obviously opportunity throughout the country. How do you do this? First, you need to identify, it uses a zip code. So zip code is going to be something that's going to be sort of a placeholder for your county. You're going to go through the census and the Pew data. Then you're going to sharpen that a little bit more with the ARDA data, Association of Religious Data Archives. And then you're going to be able to find out what faith groups are in your community that are underrepresented. You may already know this, and you may not need this kind of information, but you may be surprised, and that's why we're providing this to you, that you can look and see, and possibly even convince a group or two to communicate amongst other faiths and other congregations, so that you might have one unit that serves multiple congregations. One of the other programs that we did within the Religious Relationships Committee, and I sit on the membership side of that, we developed membership faith liaisons. So MFL, not to be convinced with their brethren in the football league, are folks who are going to work with your local councils and your territories to help you identify religious charter partners that you may have an opportunity to get to. They may be able to provide you introductions. For example, if you needed to speak to somebody in the Islamic faith that you need to go to locally, you might need somebody at the national level. And that's where the National Religious Relationships Committee comes in. It represents over 50, somewhere around 75 or 100 different faiths on that committee right now, and it's growing. The opportunity is to get a contact, start a dialogue, but all scouting is local. You need to start with your local district executive or whoever you may be working with in order to make sure that you do the best you can locally. And again, we're here to help and support at this level. Membership's got to be everybody's business. If you're not doing membership as part of your Religious Relationships Committee, please consider doing it. It's important. Just a quick list, and this will obviously provide, is a list of all the territory MFL, so membership faith liaisons. There's a few of them that we're looking for people. So if someone's interested, we'd love to take you on and get you a territory that you can work with. I'm probably not the best person to talk to about the Islamic faith, and I'll admit that straight out. That being said, I know who to point you to, and that's what we're here for. We want to make sure we connect the resources at the national level with those that are needed at the council, district, and unit level in order to make you successful. This is a council service territory map. You're going to see pretty much not a great surprise, right? The Northeast, Midwest, Southeast, where there's dense population, the smaller the territory. When you go out west, yep, there was one territory that once existed that went all the way from Canada to Mexico. Again, we want to work with councils and districts, and we need your help to get there. The territory is great. We want to work within that structure. But again, territories don't recruit kids, just like the national organization does not recruit kids. You recruit kids on the local level.
So next up, we have Howard Prager, who is from the Northeast Illinois Council, and will be talking to us about some amazing things that they're doing in their territory.
I'm going to talk about tuba choirs and how they're so important in all faith services. No, I would love to do that, and I could, but instead, why do interfaith activities? I came up with really 5 reasons. First and foremost, learn more about other faiths. And it's amazing how the third item, identify things in common with all faiths. Whenever I do an interfaith program, it's always seeing those light bulbs go on that's really exciting to me. Second, and something for most of us here to know, is have other faiths learn about Judaism. I'm surprised that even in major metropolitan areas, Judaism is just not things that we take for granted, that we know and think others know, they don't. So I think that's a good reason for that. Fourth is camaraderie, to see how the things that we all have in common, to have interfaith services and be able to come together. And then further actions that may be useful. So what are some types of activities you can do? I've done several times an interreligious Seder in the Northeast Illinois Council. I've done a walk of faith in person and online. How does that differ from a 10 Commandment hike? From what I understand, 10 Commandment hikes try to get to 10 houses of worship. We focus on 3 at a time, and we feel that we'd rather get more in depth on understanding on just a few. But both are good. Both perspectives are good. But Jeff was talking about the National Religious Relations Committee, and they've got a program called Scouts Read Religious Texts. So that's another type of interfaith activity. We're looking at having a Duty to God breakfast in the next year. Last year, we started our first weekly summer camp interfaith service. It went okay. We're able to have it every week. Some weeks greater attendance than others. We hope to expand that this year. Religious emblems workshops are certainly another great type of not only interfaith, but be able to track scouts from your own faith. And finally, various service projects, food pantries, etc. We have a big project in Chicago twice a year called Ma'ot Chitim, where we feed over 5,000 Jewish families for Rosh Hashanah and Pesach. That takes a lot of manpower, and oftentimes scouts are involved in that, but other food pantries and programs as well. I'm going to start with just sharing a little bit about the interreligious Passover Seder that we did last year. And I'm going to start by talking about a journey that a colleague of mine from the Catholic Committee in Northeast Illinois Council and I made separately, not together. I was in Abu Dhabi, he was in Egypt. And what I'll be showing you in some of these photos is the Houses of Abraham. It's a tri-faith center in Abu Dhabi with a mosque, synagogue, and church. So let me talk more about that. So in Abu Dhabi, to the Emirates, they came up with a document on human fraternity for world peace and living together. I hadn't heard of it until I was in Abu Dhabi and saw this picture with Grand Imam, the Pope, and 2 Abu Dhabi officials signing. I don't know why they did not have a Jewish member there signing this document as well, but you'll see that we're quite well represented. So there's the Pope and the Grand Imam. And funny story is my friend and colleague, Dan Peterson, happened to be on a flight and met the Grand Imam. And they got into a conversation. It was a short flight that was so meaningful that the Grand Imam took out a pen from his pocket, gave it to Dan, and said, "This is the pen that the Pope gave me that he used to sign this document. I want you to have it." And I, at the same time, sent Dan these pictures from Abu Dhabi to say, and this is the document that he signed. It was just amazing that we're both in related place at the same time. Anybody know who the synagogue is named for? If you can think of what would be the greatest scholar in Jewish history, Maimonides. That's who they named their synagogue for. And this is a picture inside the synagogue in the Houses of Abraham plot, if you will. And the church is named for the Pope for signing the declaration. You'll see the 3 houses of faith, same architecture. On the left is I believe that's the church. In the middle is the mosque. On the right is the synagogue. Dan was at the Passover Seder, and I had him, and I shared that story with others. For the Passover Seder, we have people at various tables, mixed groups, young, old, parents, kids, all together. We have discussions, and we have a couple co-leaders, often scouts, who would be the MCs in sense for the evening. So this is the first slide that kind of talks about an introduction to what the Passover Seder is. This is what we're doing. You're going to discuss and learn similarities of customs that we do in the Seder to other faiths. Enjoy some Seder foods. They prepared for the Seder both haroset right before the Seder and matzah ball soup. And then we also had snacks, matzah, and we did not do this during Pesach. So we did not have to worry about total kashrut for everything, kashrut enough for the Jewish families, and not worrying about kosher for Passover food necessarily, although certainly the matzah is kosher for Passover. You can see that we did a show of hands, and this was both online. So what does an interreligious Seder mean? It means that not only do we do the things that are important in a Seder so that people get an idea of it, that we bring in other faiths and talking about different symbols. So we start with candle lighting, and we talk about it in Christianity, from a Jewish perspective, from a Buddhist perspective, from a Hindu perspective, and ask what other faiths do, what other ways are candles used. Then we have the first cup of juice, and we talk about relate this to Scout Oath and helping other people at all times. And then we have a discussion at each of the tables. What's one way you help others? So we try to tie this in not only to inter-religious understanding, but also to scouting and the Scout Oath, the Scout Law. And so here's just an example of that. And then we do a modern 4 questions as well as the traditional 4 questions. So for the modern 4 questions, I looked into different faiths and have quotes from Mother Teresa, Khalil Gibran, and Hindu Sanskrit, and from the Reverend Martin Luther King. And with each quote, there's a couple questions, and we take time. The group decides which of these quotes they'd like to talk about, and then have time to discuss them in their group. So you can see about friendship, happiness, how do you keep moving forward, and who would be in your family circle. And those discussions really went well. And the hardest thing in doing this interreligious Seder is just keeping things moving. And so then we talk about blessings before meals. And so we look at the Catholic and Orthodox traditions, Protestant traditions, Islamic traditions. We brought in the Philmont Scout Reservation grace, Buddhist, and of course, motzi that we say. And then we had the meal, which was basically the matzah ball soup, and they had been munching on charoset and matzah, as well as other things throughout, is the conclusion, and had them discuss what's one idea you're taking from today, what's one way we can improve the Seder, and share at your table these thoughts. And then we ask people to clean up and, of course, register for a patch. So I thought maybe given the fact that Pesach is just a month away, if anybody wanted to do this, I'd be happy to share more of the slides with you, but it's been a very successful program, and I think it's just a great way. We have a Walk of Faith committee, primarily made up of the Jewish Committee and Catholic Committee on Scouting, but we also have input from other faiths. Methodist has someone on our committee as well. So we meet maybe a couple times a year, unless we've got an event when we meet more regularly.
Next, I would like to present Father Andrew. We felt it was very appropriate to have some non-Jewish representation in our interfaith conversation. And I am very proud and pleased that Father Andrew is the Interfaith Relationships Chair of my local council at Garden State. So let me pass this on to you.
Thank you, Mark. It's providential that I'm here, though. I said, Jeff, you talked about Illinois in your presentation. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, and Howard, you talked a lot about kind of close to my heart. I still have family in the Chicago suburbs. So I moved here to New Jersey 6.5 years ago. I moved here from Wisconsin. So the last couple of snowstorms were a memory of where I lived, where we used to get 100 inches of snow in the winter. So I just would like to share my experiences as from the last council I was in and this council. And most of this stems from me doing my wood badge ticket, of all things. So I wanted to do something religious relationship oriented, because in the last council that I was in Wisconsin, there was nothing at all to identify any kind of duty to God training, where to find religious emblems, coordinators or counselors for specific things. And so part of my ticket was to do that and get a whole list of what was available for as many denominations as I could find. And we did a drop down on that council's website. And then I was the council religious relationships coordinator, and then did my best to try and train unit coordinators and do that whole aspect. And so that was my introduction to all this. And then I went to Jamboree in 2017 and 2019 and was introduced to the faith and beliefs area. When I moved here to New Jersey, I got on the council's executive board. And again, as you know, religious relationships is part of membership, as you heard Jeff talk about. And that's what I've been focusing on since I've come to Jersey. And we really didn't have a lot going on. There was the Catholic committee, the Jewish committee, everybody was doing their own thing, but nobody was doing anything together. And so the assistant council executive at the time and I said, well, why can't we do a local faith and beliefs day? And so that was our mission. We did our first one, and we must have had 10 or 12 different denominations, Mark, wasn't it? Something like that. So,
Yes.
and so we started out the day together at interfaith prayer, and then each scout got a little passport, a little book, and went to each station, and then they got a little stamp for every station that they were at. And then we had there was a lunch, and then we ended the day with an interfaith worship service at the Campfire Bowl. So we did that for 2 years. The first year, we didn't get as many scouts as we thought we should have. And then, of course, we had all these ideas and visions of grandeur of how we should do that. And then we said, let's give it another chance. And then we did it the second year. And still wasn't a lot of traction. But then the last 2 years, we have piggybacked on the council's Cub Fun Day, where they have like 250 scouts or more on that weekend. And we've had our faith and beliefs has been part of that now, and it's been much more successful that way. We're still lacking in getting more denominational presence, but that's something we continue to work on. We've formed our Religious Relationships Committee. There's 8 or 10 of us on that committee, and we've been meeting quarterly to talk about things and how we do them. It's been a slow process for us. We do a yearly Duty to God awards presentation, which has been quite successful. The last 2 years have been nice with that. And so again, another way for people to see that they're not alone out there, or people of their specific denominations may or may not be working together, but learning about each other's thing. And there's a whole interfaith ceremony with that as well. Those are some of the things that we've been working on in our council, and I think it's been good for all of us to get to know each other and work together and encourage each other and do this, especially now trying to be part of this bigger event to attract more scouts to these things.
Just to add a couple of things, I think one of the reasons our interfaith committee has been successful, certainly having clergy as the chair and an individual who is an Eagle Scout himself, makes for a great awareness. We have been also very blessed that I think all of us get along pretty well.
Absolutely.
And are there for the scouts and, trying to not tear each other down, but at any opportunity that we can foster each other, we really work hard to do that. And everybody supports, the 10 Commandment hike. And when we do Scout Sabbath or Scout Sunday, there's a large presence of our committee that goes to different house of worships to represent that it's okay to observe with someone else and learn about someone else. When we did one, I guess it was about 2 years ago, Father Andrew walked right past me in a full scout uniform, and I had never seen him without his collar on. I didn't recognize him at first in a scout uniform.
That was at Temple Har Zion in Mount Holly,
which is it's an old temple in Mount Holly, New Jersey, dating back close to the Revolutionary War.
Yeah. So they just got a new rabbi, actually.
Yep. So I think that's been some of our strength, is that under Father Andrew's leadership and bringing us all together has helped us, and we all try to promote each other's activities along the way. Okay, there is a question. How far was your camp for the gathering? Debating whether we try to do our duty to God at breakfast at our council headquarters or at a camp, which is about an hour away. And I think you already mentioned that we tied into an already existing event, which also happened to be for Cub Scouts.
Right.
So it was a great opportunity to present a number of different faiths to the Cub Scouts. But the camp itself is within kind of in the center of our.
It's more It's more centrally located than the council office. But we did do our Duty to God awards presentation also out at the camp. The last 2 years we've done that as well. So.
And we're looking at the scripture reading
Scouts read sacred text.
Scouts read sacred text.
Yeah. Hopefully you're all signed up for that in your specific areas.
So our last speaker this evening is Norman Kahn. He is from the Heart of America Council.
As some of the other speakers have done, I'm going to make my point at the beginning and then I'm going to illustrate it for a few minutes. I'm in Kansas City, and it's a fairly good sized Midwestern city, but not as big as Chicago, and certainly not as big as some of the Jewish communities on the East and West Coast, even in the South. We're in a very conservative area. Kansas and Missouri are both very conservative politically. Our council is a pretty large council. The Heart of America Council covers 13 counties, ranging from northeastern Kansas to northeastern and central Missouri. The point that I'm going to make is that I think what we have done with our local Jewish committee on scouting is to try to get engaged with the larger council in interfaith ways. And the reason is that it's our view that if the Jewish committee on scouting isn't actively engaged in an interfaith manner in the larger council, the Jews will be invisible. We have one troop, we have one pack, we have one venture crew now, Jewish sponsored in the Heart of America Council. Now I'm going to illustrate a little bit about how we get engaged and how successful it has been, in my biased opinion. A little bit about me. I've been on the National Jewish Committee on Scouting now for many years. I'm a past chair of our local Jewish Committee on Scouting, but also a past membership vice president. So Jeff, I resonated with everything you were saying about membership. I used to say the same things. I mean, I still do, but I had a role to do it. And I chaired the Religious Relationships Committee for many years. And now I have passed the torch, both through the local Jewish Committee on Scouting to, I'm not on the council anymore, but I have, and I've also passed the chairpersonship of the Religious Relationships Committee to a person that I handpicked. He's a Baptist, but he is so ecumenical and just terribly respectful for all of the faiths. What we've done, how we've gotten engaged in the whole council and through the Religious Relationships Committee is basically to be very active, and where there is something that the Religious Relationships Committee should do, we've just gotten ourselves involved in it. So, for example, the Religious Relationships Committee is in charge of our 10 Commandment trek, which we've been doing now every year and a half or so for about 20 years. We're up to now 8 or 9 different faiths. We usually visit 4 on one Sunday and then wait a few months and visit another 4. We've got a great patch. It's a yin and yang patch. And you get the first half after the first 4 on one Sunday and the second half after the next. But we've been getting 88, 120 people. We've even had some television cameras a couple of times, some media. But what we learned early on was that the Scouts don't like talking heads. And even though the talking heads like to talk to the Scouts and talk to them about their faith, that's not what the Scouts are interested in. They're interested in the immersive experience of actually going to a worship service. So we always start at the Jewish synagogue for a couple of reasons. One is they have an early service on Sunday at 8 o'clock, so we can get even to a 9 o'clock Catholic service just a few minutes away. But we unroll a Torah scroll to the 10 Commandments, so everybody can see where the 10 Commandments came from originally, and just line up everybody and pass them through, past the Torah, and see the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20. And then we move on to the other faiths, but it sets the stage that all of the faiths either recognize the 10 Commandments or have ethical principles that they talk about that are consistent with the 10 Commandments. So the faiths that we do now, we do Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, Sikh, Buddhist, Hindu, Islam, and Orthodox is our newest one. We had Mormons, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, until they separated from Scouting. We replaced them, interestingly, with the Community of Christ, used to be known as the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Those two groups don't get along, and so we couldn't have them both at the same time. But when the LDS left, we got the Community of Christ back. So that's been very successful. We also take responsibility for training chaplains and chaplains' aides, and that we do once a year, and we usually get about 30 or 40 chaplains and chaplains' aides. That's a half a day. The real advantage that we have of doing that is that we can focus this on interfaith worship. So we make a big point about when a unit can and should worship in a single faith. An example would be if you're going to do an invocation at a church where the troop is affiliated with that troop, meets at that church, and you have an invocation at the scout meeting, it would be perfectly appropriate to do it in the tradition of that particular faith. But there are many, many places, council dinners, scout camp, where you have an interfaith group, and people need to know how to do an interfaith grace before meals, how to do an interfaith invocation, benediction, how to do an interfaith worship service. We're going to do one at the Heart of America Council as the home of the tribe of Miccosay, which is huge now. And the tribe has its own celebration right before summer camp starts. And we do an interfaith worship service at that setting as well. We have gotten our council to adopt policy that says that if you're going to do an invocation or a grace before meals at an interfaith setting, then you need to do it in an interfaith way. And it's not praying personally in public, it's leading a diverse community in prayer. And we have a little orientation that we give to people who we invite so that they are careful and do it in an interfaith manner. Interestingly, we also do chartered organization representative training, core training. You might think that that's something that wouldn't be in a religious relationships committee, but as you know, the vast majority of troops and even many Cub packs are sponsored by religious houses of worship. And so it got to us to do the chartered organization representative training. That's not a particularly interfaith experience, but I mention it because that's something that our Religious Relationships Committee takes responsibility for. I'm going to conclude a little bit with just sharing who the group is. The active members of our local Religious Relationships Committee are 2 Baptists, 2 Catholics, the chair of the Protestant Committee, myself. And in addition, there are people who participate, but only for particular events, like the Sikh representative, who is a Sikh scouter, the Buddhist representative, the Orthodox representative, the Islamic representatives. There are 2, both of whom are scouters. The Community of Christ representative is a scouter. The Hindu representative is a scouter. They only get engaged in things like planning the 10 Commandment trek or planning some kind of an interfaith activity. They don't usually participate in the centralized planning of the Religious Relationships Committee. I'm going to conclude there by saying that in a council like Heart of America, which in some ways is very large, it's a very large area territorially. It's a pretty reasonably good sized council in terms of membership. We rank first per capita and fight with the Sam Houston Council for the absolute number of religious emblems that are earned each year, because it's something that's very strong. It's a very strong part of our particular council. And yet the Jewish community is a very small part of the council. So we have deliberately been very active, very engaged, taken responsibility for a good deal of what the Religious Relationships Committee does to ensure that there's a significant interfaith, respectful setting because of the activity of the Jewish committee.
Norman, how would you look to use the Interfaith Council or the committee as a way of increasing membership, either amongst the Jewish community or the greater interreligious community?
Well, I'll just give you an example. There is now a Cub pack at the mosque, and there wasn't when we started the interfaith treks. And now that they have a Cub pack and have had one for a couple of years, it's very likely they're going to have a scout troop as the Cubs mature into the scout unit. So that's a good example of where our interfaith activities hosted by the Religious Relationships Committee have resulted in a significant amount of focus on scouting at the various houses of worship so that they have developed their own units. And that, of course, increases membership.
Question would be, how could you see using the issue of interreligious programming to foster membership in the council?
I have a real life example. We had a Presbyterian church that's 2 blocks away from us, had a scout troop there for 77 years. And they got a new pastor at this church, and they just did not get along and have a good relationship. And now that troop has come 2 blocks away to the Episcopal Church. All of those kids, they don't have a specific denomination, but when we had Scout Sunday, the kids showed up and we had them do scripture readings in church and things like that. And so I think it's a good outreach that way to bring something to, a lot of Scouts aren't churched at all. So I think it's been a revelation for actually a lot of my parishioners, and we how have the Scouts involved in things that we do other than worship service, and there are activities, and so I think that it's good for a multi-generational thing. We're especially for kids to try and be involved in something and learn about something in that respect. So we've done our 10 Commandment hikes as well, and I think that's been really well received.
Howard,
Yeah.
same question.
I've been to a few Scout Sundays of all places in the UK, and I talked to my friend there, and I said, it seems like religion is really important in Scouting in the UK, and he said, it's the only time the kids show up at church. I don't know how you feel or your communities are, but I think anything that we can do to encourage faith and religion, whatever religion it is, and encourage that, I think is a good thing. So we have not had the success that I know of starting new units, but we have promoted a lot the Religious Emblems Awards at various scouting events, and hopefully we've encouraged scouts to learn more about their own faith. And I wish, Jeff, that I had an example for you of starting new units. I can tell you I've started new units, get Jewish units more active and involved, but I don't have anything else.
Now that we all have additional tools, it'll be interesting to ask the same question maybe 6 months from now and get Jeff some good answers that he can bring forward based on the National Jewish Committee's response to the information that he provided.
Hey, Mark, if I could jump in on a second on that last question.
Sure.
I think
you can raise your hand while Jeff's talking. That's great. Thanks, Jeff.
So one thing is, right, when I talked about, what's in it for the religious institution, I think that's really an important thing for us to think about, right? A lot of religious groups have aging and declining population. We heard that's the only time they go to church. If you bring in new scouting families that attend unit activities at those facilities, that may be an opportunity for them to get to know the religious institution and may decide to join. So things like a community service drive, right? Food drive or something else, or a scout service, those are all great ways to bring people into religious institutions. And again, possibly with the benefit of them joining those institutions.
It's non-threatening, non-assuming, so, and I'm just jump in and that the troop that's come over to our church now, they've had a couple Eagle ceremonies in the church. And so that again is a little bit less intimidating to inviting someone to come to the worship space on Sunday or Saturday evening, whatever. And people have come to church because of that. I will say also that I'm hoping that I'm correct that we're starting to see a little bit of a societal change in churches. I don't know if you've all seen that in synagogue or not, that if younger people are showing up. But in the last few months, I've had some younger families actually show. I had a 16-year-old young man show up today with his mother and one of his siblings because he wanted to come to church to see what's going.
I just wanted to tell you one of the ways that I've leveraged our Council's Interfaith Committee, we call it an Interfaith Committee instead of a Religious Relationships Committee, but same thing, is whenever we're asked to do an interfaith service, whether it's at a camporee or at the summer camp or whatever, I always volunteer to do that. And that accomplishes two things. One, it makes sure that the interfaith service is actually an interfaith service, because a lot of people don't understand that there's a difference between interfaith and non-denominational, but it accomplishes that. The second thing that it does is it lets me at the beginning of the service just introduce myself and tell them I'm the chairman of the Jewish Committee on Scouting. Like many other councils, Jews in New Hampshire are in all kinds of units. We don't have a Jewish sponsored unit in the council, so they're spread around. And by saying that at the beginning of the service and just introducing myself, it tells everybody who's there, wow, we have a Jewish Committee on Scouting. And you'd be amazed at how many Jewish scouts come up to me after the service and just say, hi, I'm Jewish. Can you tell me about this Jewish Committee on Scouting? And it helps me find them. So I just wanted to pass that on.
And Bruce.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that one of the ways that I've always been successful in bringing a lot of faiths together is through a couple of different programs that we've always done. One of them is a 10 Commandment hike. And I know a lot of locations do 10 Commandment hikes. And what it does is it brings all the faiths together. And when I was in Suffolk County, we were able to go to 10 different religions. They learned about each religion. They learned about the house of worship we were in, and they learned about a commandment. And it was a great day. I've been involved with probably over a half a dozen of them in Suffolk County. Another way is, and I've done this probably for 35 years now, is we recognize all Eagle Scouts regardless of religion. One of the things that I've done down here in Florida, I get calls from from families of other religions, and they say, how come my son can get an Eagle certificate from the Jewish committee, but I can't even get it from the Catholic committee? So the word gets out there. So in your council, if you can, suggest that every Eagle Scout get a certificate from the Jewish committee. Fortunately for me here, I do all the Eagle certificates for Central Florida Council. So everybody who becomes an Eagle Scout gets a certificate from the Central Florida Jewish committee as well. But it's a great way to get the word out there. Another idea is to include Girl Scouts. I know that we try not to do that, but most Girl Scouts have brothers or sisters, and some of them are in scouting, and they know other people that are in scouting. So the more ways you can get the word out there, the better communications you have, and the better chances you'll be able to get all religions together. So those are the things that have been really working for me.
And thank you, everybody, for attending this evening. Thank you especially to our presenters. I think we heard a wide variety of activities and opportunities that we can all take back and try to improve our own local council activities.